Yes, it's a lovely place to live, it's very glamorous, it's got a great lifestyle, a great quality of life. It's also packed with lots of restaurants and extracurricular activities. However, look at the statistics of what all of that translates into on a day-to-day basis. So 9.7% of the population are living with diabetes in the Middle East and Northern Africa alone. 50% of those cases are apparently undiagnosed. And in the next 20 years, the WHO has predicted a 100% increase in the Middle East itself. Hypertension is another one, and diabetes, as we all know. The GCC, some of the published facts, and one of the problems that we do have with the GCC in the Middle East is transparency of information. The facts speak for themselves, and those are alarming figures, especially the triple of diabetes in the UAE alone by 2035. So that time frame actually affects all of you here who are students currently at this institution. So it's something that if you want to, you can bring about change in how we deliver healthcare and how we solve the problem of double disease that's creeping up. We're looking at Africa. Africa and India are not so dissimilar. We look at the 54 low to middle income countries. Unfortunately, in India, we still have regions where we do have a direct correlation in the statistics and demographic between Africa and India. Now, non-communicable disease is supposed to be the main cause of death by 2030, so we're not that far away from having a major crisis on our hands, again, which most of you can do something about. The Northern African region, again, which is said to be historically a lot more developed and advanced despite political instability, more than 75% of all deaths in 2012 were due to NCDs. Now, the similarities that I touched on earlier on, again, I'm not going to enhance too much, but basically, again, the slide speaks for itself. And if you go to the last point, this is something that actually comes directly to the delivery of healthcare and the lifestyle that we have in India at the moment, and the rapid change, which is the increase in motorization and urbanization, and a decrease in traditional rural lifestyle. So that's certainly food for thought. I was asked to talk very quickly from a legal perspective of how medical law is changing in the UAE. In the UAE especially, of course, due to the close proximity with India, a large amount of practitioners do go across to do sabbaticals, to do stints, to do locums, or to actually look for alternative prospects. The private sector is hungry for talent and hungry for qualitative talent. Unfortunately, the risks associated historically with the delivery of healthcare has been something of a deterrent to attracting good talent. Now, I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but a couple of years ago, a doctor in his 70s, he was of South African origin, was arrested while transiting through Dubai International Airport. Now, he hadn't done anything wrong. He wasn't smuggling, he wasn't carrying drugs or anything. The mistake he had made is that 10 years previously, he did a locum volunteer stint in the UAE. This gentleman was a pediatric oncologist, and he was treating a Yemeni 3-year-old child who unfortunately had cancer so far developed that there was no actual possibility of her survival at all. This little girl died on his watch. Doctor, we'll call him CK for the moment, went back, continued his stint, continued practice, retired. 10 years on, went to attend a family wedding in Canada and was nabbed at the airport. Why? Because there was a case filed against him. A case filed against him because of the death of this 3-year-old girl who had no hope of survival anyway. So if anything, our dear doctor from South Africa was doing all he could with palliative care to make her transition as comfortable as possible. It took him almost 18 months to be freed, and a lot of lobbying internationally, of course. And the reason why I talk about that is to show you where we have actually managed to make change in the Middle East with the UAE federal law on medical liability, which has just been brought in and is now actually effective as such. And for those of you that are familiar with the Middle East and the culture and the Sharia law principles, which do impact the delivery of healthcare, this is a very important piece of legislation. First and foremost, it addresses issues that are sociologically taboo and have been historically. And there are people on the ground in the UAE who are victims of such taboos. So for them, this is a tremendous respite. So we're looking at issues of gender reassignment surgery. We look at issues of natural death and DNR. We look at criminal and civil liability of medical practitioners. And I won't bore you with the detail, but some of the highlights of the new legislation are decriminalization, which is a massive breath of fresh air for doctors, who can then treat patients without fearing that a powerful local may go across and file a complaint, and they may be picked up at the airport, at their home, or whilst picking up their children from school. So these are issues that actually apply to practitioners delivering healthcare on the ground. The criminal and civil liability, and we touched on this earlier on by some of my fellow speakers, goes to the heart of setting up a medical liability committee. So we then have a neutral body of medical experts who are determining culpability, causation, contributory negligence, if at all, and gross medical negligence, if at all. Factors that are taken into account are obviously issues relating to competency and degrees of competency of a physician of the same standing. So you are, if anything, actually brought under the spotlight by your own colleagues, and that is a tremendous progression in that part of the world. Decriminalization is another factor that has helped tremendously with attracting more talent and increasing the standard of excellence in the delivery of healthcare. We are pushed for time, so I just wanted to leave, especially the students that are here today who are looking at career options, a few quick points on what you are really to remember. And the point is, to all of you who are looking at career options and thinking, well, what do I do with all this talent that we've amassed, for example, some of the legislation we've looked at today? There is reward in innovation, there is reward in being daring, and if you're not daring, you cannot bring about innovation. So I urge you to look outside your comfort zone, to look at underdeveloped countries, to be proactive, not reactive, and to look also to those sectors of industry that can help you fulfill your dream of delivering an enriched healthcare system, for example, in private equity, financial institutions. You can apply your healthcare knowledge to consulting, to analysis, to helping someone do a deal better. So for example, to bringing healthcare cross-border, you're looking at a good operator from India, a good competent operator. It's a win-win situation, it's a profit-making machine. However, the composition of that hospital, you could actually have a part to play in what are the areas of specialisms and what are needed. So there's a great deal of comparative analysis and knowledge that the students today can take away with them and actually go out and apply for internships and train and apply that knowledge that you've picked up here to further the betterment and enrich the population of other developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sunita Singh Dalal. Now I request Dr. R. Balasubramanian to talk about healthcare as a human right from his experience of working with the indigenous people as well as working at the policy level, both at the national and international levels.
Good evening. Nearly 7 or 8 months ago, when Dr. Gurpur asked me to be a panelist here, I sort of said yes, not realizing what I was getting into. And for half the time I thought I'll be speaking to just doctors and get away with it. And then when I come here, I realize I have to speak with the presence of eminent jurists. So the only thing I could speak about today, which I can fundamentally speak without being challenged, is from my experience. Because that's something nobody can challenge me about. And what I'm going to speak is something very counterintuitive. It's something which none of us think about. When you talk about rights, as an activist myself, we always think about, and Dr. Mohan Agashi spoke so well about rights and responsibilities. We talk about rights as though it has to be enshrined in the Constitution, to be packaged and produced by the state on behalf of the citizens. I would like to be very different and talk from the experience of having lived with indigenous communities in the forest of Karnataka, and talk about the fact that development as we understand, the state as we understand, the Constitution as we understand, has actually violated the rights of people itself. It's something very, very different that I'm going to talk about. So I'm not talking about the government enshrining right to health as part of its mandate, but pleading with the government and with all of you sitting here to be appreciative of the fact that if you bring in laws, you might actually be violating rights of people which may actually affect their fundamental health itself. And a classical extension of my argument is indigenous tribal communities. The first time I was exposed to what tribals are capable of, and in Karnataka we have a very strong Quackery Act, which forbids my poor little tribal traditional practitioner sitting in the forest legally from practicing anything that he knows. And 35 years ago, when I first went into the forest, a Jenukurba tribal who was gathering honey from the tree which was 40 feet tall, slipped and fell down and broke his head of the femur. And being trained in modern medicine, I put him into a small little car I could manage, took him to my professor of orthopedics, Dr. Santosh is here, and he said he needs to be operated. And this professor in front of me in the local Kannada language told me that he needs blood to be transfused. And this Jenukurba believes ardently that the moment you prick an injection or anything like a needle into his body, his spirit will escape through it. And so he heard this and he said, no way I'm going to subject myself to any blood transfusion. And so by the time I came back to the forest, that guy was back in the forest. And very disappointed because modern medicine couldn't work its magic. I just didn't go to the tribal colony for nearly 30, 40 days. 40 days later I go, I find Masti running up to me and saying he's completely healed. Now, orthopedicians in this audience would say it could be a matter of chance, like, it could be perfect healing as a matter of chance, but I know from the little experience I had, he must have had some shortening of limb, some problem. It couldn't have healed in 40 to 50 days. He was 22 years old. And I asked him how, and his father-in-law was also called Masti, used to go into the forest, get herbs, mix it in an egg, and apply it every day. So the albumin in the egg was the binder for the medicines. 40 consecutive days of this, and he was able to walk and climb a tree as before. Now I say this because the same Masti can no longer go into the forest to pick that herb today because the Forest Conservation Act, the local area being declared the national park protecting the tiger, has forgotten to protect the traditional wisdom of this tribal today. And now isn't that a violation of rights also? Now he can never access what he knows as healthcare, and now he has to seek a modern hospital with a modern MS orthopedics to take care of his limb. To give another example, many years ago, my wife is an obstetrician, and so we had this great hospital, and every woman coming and getting delivered in our hospital, and everybody happy. The World Bank came and did a case study, how we had changed healthcare in tribal areas. Gave us recognitions, awards, everything came our way, and I was extremely happy and impressed, till I took a break. And sometimes when you take breaks, they can be dangerous for you and others around you. And I was sitting away in Harvard looking at what I was doing with my life, and then I realized traditional tribal communities, when they deliver the children, and we have some very, very well-known obstetricians here too, had a very different way of delivering. And when they came into my hospital, my wife would receive the baby. I remember I was trained by Professor Kaulgood, a great obstetrician himself, who used to tell me, do nothing, just wait at the other side of the mother, watchful expectancy, and you'll be an obstetrician. And a very simplistic definition, though, and my wife being an obstetrician, I actually chose a better option. Marry an obstetrician, it's easier. So you got to do nothing. And so she used to, we would make the patient lie on the table and then deliver the baby. a great intervention, and we said we're saving people's lives and reducing infant mortality and maternal mortality. And traditionally, a community which never knew a C-section, a community which never had to really need an obstetrician, you know how they would deliver? They would actually tie a rope to the reaper of their hut, hold on to the knot, squat, and wait and deliver. Possibly the best gravity-aided position you can get for normal delivery. And then we come and say, no, that's not the way to deliver. That's bad. You got to lie supine. So modern medicine itself can violate human rights, the rights of traditional understanding of people itself. This is another example. And I'm not romanticizing. I'm just giving you one side of the story, just to sensitize you to understand that for all you know, doing good may actually be doing harm. So we'll have to actually understand what are we doing. And the last example I would like to give is when I went in, I found a very peculiar circumstance amongst tribals. They would have children exactly in intervals of 4 years. And I was fascinated, how can these people just plan their pregnancies so perfectly? People have no concept of time, no concept of a calendar, who just lived from sunrise to sunset. And they would perfectly plan their pregnancy with the intervention of 4 years. And I was running a school also, and children would have brothers and sisters 4 years apart. And very fascinated by this, I went to that old Masti, who had become my friend and teacher and guide by then, and asked him, what magic is this that our women are so perfect? Do they have abstinence for 4 years, 3 years at least? And he told me, no, we have some trick for that. And what trick was? The trick was, there was a small little herb that would grow actually in the crevices of rocks on the river front. And this medicine, and these were people, this is a generation of people who were actually 15, 20 years beyond what I'm talking, the stories I'm talking. So they had this 4-year gap 15, 20 years earlier, and now every woman was delivering every year. So when I told him, what do I do? How do I break the cycle from 1 year to 4 years? And he said, no, you can't do that. And the reason he said I can't do that is because I couldn't find that herb which would be found in the crevices of rocks. And I couldn't find that herb. He would say 4 continuous days postpartum, you eat that herb, crush it and eat it. 4 more years, you won't have a child. Now you can disbelieve me. Modern science can say we have not validated it. We are not under randomized controlled trial. We can always justify it in our own scientific ways. But the fact is I lived there and I can talk to you. And why can't we do that today is because the government, in Jawaharlal Nehru's words, built a temple of modern India, built 4 great reservoirs in this area, demolished all the forests in the place, destroyed all that habitat, and that rock anymore is sunk in the river now. You can never find it. So we just don't know what the herb is all about. And this is also a violation of tribal rights in my view. So when we talk of health rights, it's not, it's funny. Tribals would access to universal health care in their own way. These tribals had access to 160 different kinds of greens, 30 different kinds of tubers, and all the deer meat and wild boar meat they could eat. Where would you get protein calorie malnutrition? And suddenly we come and say, don't touch all that, it's all national park. And so now, we're actually causing protein calorie malnutrition, and then we have a program from Government of India saying tribal development has to happen. So my only request to all the people sitting here is when we stand up and get together, and we stand up framing laws, and when we start framing laws for particular constituencies, never ever forget, there's a constituency out there whose voice you'll never hear. There's a constituency out there whose faces you'll never see. And unless a law encompasses them, includes them, it's no law at all. And so before I conclude, there are 70,000 traditional medical practitioners in the state of Karnataka alone. Maybe all of them are not scientifically valid, but why don't you presume that most of them could be valid, and then go with an open mind, and before we bring in a law called anti-quackery, which can actually be violative of so many thousands of practitioners for whom there's no replacement. You don't have an alternative of modern medicine, because UHC is still it's just a passionate slogan of the Government of India, nothing more than that. And with that being the reality, before we bring in rules, let's understand development itself, fundamentally as we understand it, economic growth as we understand it, could be the greatest violator of human rights today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balasubramanian. Probably that's a very comprehensive dimension of healthcare, as well as comprehensive agenda for policy reform. Now, before we move on to the last theme of the track 3, which is patient safety, I request Quizmaster Sachin to come in and just administer one quiz, because we are really running short of time, but we can't have the monotony for more than 1 hour. So I request you to break the monotony.
All right. So, firstly, good afternoon to each and every one of you. I won't take too much. I have a minute under me. So, like I think Dr. Gupte mentioned, like all kids of doctors don't pursue doctors. That's the same case with me as well. My dad's a doctor. I went to law school, didn't study law, and I'm not doing law at all. I'm currently a quiz master. So I'm going to play a question for you, and this is within the realm of healthcare. And how we can do this is, whoever happens to know the answer, you can raise your hand. I've got a lot of goodies with me right here, and if you raise your hand and give me the right answer, I've got a goodie coming your way. I've got 2 questions, and let's wrap this under 1 minute 30 seconds or so. So this is the first question. Yeah. Oh, please. Absolutely.
So for the quiz, I would request the audience to raise your hand, introduce yourself, look into the camera, which is centrally located, and answer the question. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the first question, audience. So we've also got the other campuses as well. So this question, people on the dais as well, you can have a stab at the question as well. So there was an activist by name of David Lawrence Kirby, who was the subject of a photograph taken at his deathbed by a photographer by name of Therese Frere. The iconic image was published in Life magazine, and the photo is being referred to as the picture that changed the face of Dash. This picture was later used by the United Colors of Benetton for a very controversial ad campaign. And I'm going to show you the image. The image is in the next slide, which you see right now. You can see David Kirby to your left there, and who you see in the other members in the photo are actually the members of his family. And this is the first ever photo that was actually, depicting something. In fact, there was a lot of general, misinformation. Nobody really had an idea about whatever the answer to this question is. So very simply, the blank is this photo changed the face of something. So what did this photo change the face of? And again, don't think too complicated within the realm of healthcare. So think about what this answer could be. Can we have somebody raise their hands? So, okay, we've got somebody raising their hand there. Okay, just a minute. Madam, so if you could introduce yourself, the mic is coming your way. Introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and what you think the answer to this question is. Yes.
Myself, Sonali Agarwal. I'm from Ahmedabad.
Okay.
I think the picture changed the face of AIDS.
The face of AIDS, as in you're saying that this is the first actual physical, pictorial representation of how a patient from AIDS actually suffered, and this is when it got a lot more information came out in the realm of AIDS. That's exactly the right answer. Can we have a round of applause for Sonali? That is the right answer. And we have a prize coming away. Can we have a round of applause for her, please? That's really nicely done. I've got one more question. All right, let's go to the next question. And as you can see, the answer was AIDS. In fact, David Kirby was an AIDS activist. Let's go to the next question. And this is also an interesting question. So who you see on your screen is a lawyer by name of Jeffrey Bowers. So Jeffrey Bowers, along with another lawyer by name of...
And we stand up framing laws. And when we start framing laws for particular constituencies, never ever forget, there's a constituency out there whose voice you'll never hear. There's a constituency out there whose faces you'll never see. And unless a law encompasses them, includes them, it's no law at all. And so before I conclude, there are 70,000 traditional medical practitioners in the state of Karnataka alone. Maybe all of them are not scientifically valid. But why don't we presume that most of them could be valid, and then go with an open mind? And before we bring in a law called anti-quackery, which can actually be violative of so many thousands of practitioners for whom there's no replacement. You don't have an alternative of modern medicine, because UHC is still it's just a passionate slogan of the government of India, nothing more than that. And with that being the reality, before we bring in rules, let's understand development itself, fundamentally as we understand it, economic growth as we understand it, could be the greatest violator of human rights today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balasubramanian. Probably that's a very comprehensive dimension of healthcare, as well as comprehensive agenda for policy reform. Now, before we move on to the last theme of the track 3, which is patient safety, I request Quizmaster Sachin to come in and just administer one quiz, because we are really running short of time, but we can't have the monotony for more than 1 hour. So I request you to break the monotony.
All right, so firstly, good afternoon to each and every one of you. I won't take too much. I have a minute under me. So like I think Dr. Gupte mentioned, like all kids of doctors don't pursue doctors. That's the same case with me as well. My dad's a doctor. I went to law school, didn't study law, and I'm not doing law at all. I'm currently a quiz master. So I'm going to play a question for you, and this is within the realm of healthcare. And how we can do this is, whoever happens to know the answer, you can raise your hand. I've got a lot of goodies with me right here, and if you raise your hand and give me the right answer, I've got a goodie coming your way. I've got 2 questions, and let's wrap this under 1 minute 30 seconds or so. So this is the first question. Yeah. Oh, please. Absolutely.
So for the quiz, I would request the audience to raise your hand, introduce yourself, look into the camera, which is centrally located, and answer the question. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the first question, audience. So we've also got the other campuses as well. So this question, people on the dais as well, you can have a stab at the question as well. So there was an activist by name of David Lawrence Kirby, who was the subject of a photograph taken at his deathbed by a photographer by name of Therese Frere. The iconic image was published in Life magazine, and the photo is being referred to as the picture that changed the face of Dash. This picture was later used by the United Colors of Benetton for a very controversial ad campaign. And I'm going to show you the image. The image is in the next slide, which you see right now. You can see David Kirby to your left there, and who you see in the other members in the photo are actually the members of his family. And this is the first ever photo that was actually, depicting something. In fact, there was a lot of general, misinformation. Nobody really had an idea about whatever the answer to this question is. So very simply, the blank is this photo changed the face of something. So what did this photo change the face of? And again, don't think too complicated within the realm of healthcare. So think about what this answer could be. Can we have somebody raise their hands? So, okay, we've got somebody raising their hand there. Okay, just a minute. Madam, so if you could introduce yourself, the mic is coming your way. Introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and what you think the answer to this question is. Yes.
Myself, Sonali Agarwal. I'm from Ahmedabad.
Okay.
I think the picture changed the face of AIDS.
The face of AIDS, as in you're saying that this is the first actual physical, pictorial representation of how a patient from AIDS actually suffered, and this is when it got a lot more information came out in the realm of AIDS. That's exactly the right answer. Can we have a round of applause for Sonali? That is the right answer. And we have a prize coming away. Can we have a round of applause for her, please? That's really nicely done. I've got one more question. All right, let's go to the next question. And as you can see, the answer was AIDS. In fact, David Kirby was an AIDS activist. Let's go to the next question. And this is also an interesting question. So who you see on your screen is a lawyer by name of Jeffrey Bowers. So Jeffrey Bowers, along with another lawyer by name of Clarence B. Kane, both their lives happen to have been the inspiration for a very, very famous award-winning acclaimed film. So I'd like you to identify this film for me. So Mr. Bowers was an attorney who in 1987 sued the law firm Baker & McKenzie for wrongful dismissal on the grounds of discrimination due to a disease. Mr. Kane was an attorney of Hyatt Legal Services and was fired after his employee found out that he had a certain disease. He sued Hyatt in 1990 and won the case also. So I'd like you to tell me which very, very famous movie this is. In fact, the actor who played the protagonist in the movie won an Oscar, a best actor Oscar for the performance that he gave. So we've got one hand going right there. We've got that gentleman. Sir, if you could, I'll go that side. Let me just switch it up. I'll go that side. And sir, if you could introduce yourself and tell us what you think the answer is.
My name is Santosh Dikshit. I'm from Pune.
Okay.
I think the movie is Philadelphia.
You think the movie is Philadelphia that starred Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington? That is the right answer. So Tom Hanks, in fact, played the role and won himself an Oscar for that. So that's it from me for this slot. I'll keep popping in every once in a while and kind of just lighten the kind of mood right here. I'll come back for a recap as well. Thank you, dignitaries on the stage. Thank you, Gurpur ma'am. And we'll get back to proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin. I hope that has broken the monotony. Now let's go over to the last theme, that is patient safety law. I request Professor John Tingle, Reader in Health Law, Nottingham Trent University, to speak on patient safety, medico-legal aspects.
Good afternoon. It's a delight to be here that the weather's far better here than it is in England. But it took 13 hours, so I was hoping the planes can go faster than they normally do, but we couldn't arrange that. Now, looking at what we're doing today is looking at patient safety from a global perspective. And one of the things I'm very keen on doing is saying, when you're talking about health systems and the design of systems, not to reinvent the wheel. We can all learn from each other. And clearly lots of countries across the world are dealing with the same problem. Our Secretary of State, Jeremy Hunt, gave a presentation in Bonn, which I attended along with other WHO people and experts and academics. And he quoted that every year an estimated 1 million patients die in hospitals across the world because of avoidable clinical mistakes. He said, on this scale, it sits along hypersensitive heart disease, road deaths, as one of the top causes of death in the world today. So clearly, if we look at the UK, and that's often held out to be a model of patient safety work, and it is to a large extent. The figures show that there's every week in England, there's 150 avoidable deaths in the NHS every week. So that's in the UK. And we tend to think that we've got a sort of Rolls-Royce patient safety system. We thought that when we developed the present system in 2000, in the year 2000. In America, there was a document called To Err is Human. And in England, we had a document called Organisation with a Memory. And that really marked, in Europe, the two sort of leading proponents of patient safety. In 2017, 17 years on, how much has changed? How much has changed in England? Well, we've made only incremental progress. Lessons still are not being learnt. There's no real sort of leadership, I think, at local level. And patient safety is still the biggest concern of the health regulator, the Care Quality Commission. We're very bad across the UK in investigating accidents. People are not really trained to do it, and we've got a very poor complaint system. But we've been at it for 17 years. America, they've made progress, but when you look holistically at how you develop a patient-centric culture, it's very, very difficult. So, what problems do we face? Well, we've got an increasingly older population. The older you get, the more healthcare resources you consume. We're living longer. We have budget constraints. The NHS in England, you can call a socialised healthcare structure. There's an infinite demand for healthcare services, but only a finite amount of resources available. Now, also, if we look at things like antibiotics and resistance to those, certainly the more we use antibiotics, the more problems we have. But also, people are presenting with different illnesses, 3 or 4 different illnesses, which are quite difficult to treat. So in England, we're facing this problem of a patient safety sort of issue with over 150 avoidable deaths per week. We're looking at certain issues such as elderly populations and budget constraints. How do we deal with those issues? So what we're looking at is redesigning certain aspects of the system. The focus has been on looking at the airline industry. When you fly Virgin or you fly Spice or you fly an airline, you assume and you'll get a safe journey. But when you go for healthcare treatment, do you view the same sort of view as, oh, I'll get there, I'll get to Delhi, I'll get to Pune? Will you get through the treatment? There's no reason why you shouldn't do. The airline industry has been a model for managing patient safety for a long time. So in April of this year, in England, we created the Health Service Investigative Board, which is based on the Air Accident Board. So we've created in the UK a new accident investigation board in order to try and deal with these problems. Very few court cases go to the courts from a medical legal point of view. We have an organisation called the National Health Service Litigation Authority, and they try and settle a lot of the cases that they do. We can probably dispose of a case in about 1.5 years or just over that. Last year, the government paid £1.1 billion to patients who suffered harm. This year, it'll be £1.4 billion. They owe in total around about £58 billion to people who think have been injured. Currently, over a third of that 1.1 billion will be paid to the legal profession. And a lot of that will be paid to claimant lawyers. So that's quite an interesting sort of perspective, that where we deal with litigation, where we deal with the issues of that, certainly when we look at England as a model, then there are things that you don't want to take away from that. And I think one of the problems that we've had in the UK is that there's been very little conceptual underpinning of what we're trying to do. Nobody's thought holistically about issues such as patient rights, transparency, and what we're looking at now are new metrics. We've got this concept known as intelligent transparency, where we're creating physician metrics. There is a great difference of power relationship between a doctor and a patient. We've got a recent case last year in the Supreme Court called Montgomery, which brought into English law the concept of informed consent in English law. Patients now are not viewed as they once were, as passive recipients of care. The internet, etc., has made them more participants. So English common law is saying that the age of medical paternalism is no longer with us. The Supreme Court have said that, but we're dealing with a legal system where patients are far more aware of their rights. But how do we practically bring in a patient-centric culture? How do we put patient safety first? If over 1 million patients a year across the world die, about 1 in 10 patients in developed countries will suffer an adverse outcome when they go to hospital. Error is inevitable in healthcare because you're dealing with complex equipment, you're dealing with people, we all make mistakes, nobody's infallible. So all we can hope to do in patient safety is to minimize the possibility of risk, to develop reflective practices so we put the patient first. But how do we do that? How do we articulate this concept of patient rights? So clearly what we do is look at things like education and training. The WHO have a patient safety curriculum for doctors. They have a patient safety curriculum for people who are not doctors. There's lots of programs on looking at human factors analysis and loads of all those other sort of things that you can see on the internet. It is quite an interesting aspect in terms of how you develop things that go on. The Dutch, for example, we're working with the Dutch on a number of projects, and they've tried to work away from the centralized model where patient safety policies have come down from the government. The idea is that they come up from the doctor, from the nurse. Arguably, how do we sort of learn lessons? And if we look at this holistically, most of the errors in healthcare are very simple errors. They concern failures in communication. 50% of errors could be avoided if healthcare is communicated properly with the patient and with each other. It's not difficult, but you can see time and time again the same errors being made for the last 17 years. It's really instilling reflective practice, and my view is that should be really the concept of a professional health carer. They should be taking that concept with them. Instead, the government are pushing it down. And quite clearly, clinicians feel that sometimes a lot of the quality policies are there to restrain their autonomy that they've got. So certainly, there are a variety of issues. I don't want you to think that clearly with the costs of litigation, lawyers are not like rhinoceroses, thick-skinned and charge a lot. They're not like that at all. They advocate patient rights, and they're there to articulate those